Hudson, deep in the bosom of suburbia. I met a young girl, she sang mighty fine, tears on my pillow.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the first In the Fox's Den of 2022, and also from our new studio as well. And today we've got our first American, and he's actually talking to us from New York. He is a singer-songwriter that you will have known since the 1980s, but he's still going strong. He's still very talented, and he still packs out the audiences when he comes for a tour in the UK. So let me introduce to you Dean Friedman. Welcome, Dean Friedman.
How you doing, Rick? Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Doing
Good
fine,
to see
but we've had a storm here today where lots of cars have been hit, and I think one person has actually died today. But
Sorry to hear that.
we name our storms, so this has been Storm Eunice. And that probably sounds a bit strange in America, because you get hurricanes and we name our storms. So that probably shows the difference between us, I think, Dean.
Well, I understand if the roof of the O2 blew off, that it's got to be a pretty serious storm. I guess Eunice got up at the wrong side of bed today.
Yeah, no, I think there's got to be some work done to the O2 and a few other buildings as well. Anyway, look, this is our first In the Fox's Den of the year. But that's not the only first, because you're also the first American that I've ever had on here, and it's fantastic that you're talking to me from New York. But this is also the first In the Fox's Den that I've done in our new studio in Hertfordshire. So there we are. There's loads of firsts for you there.
Cool. Well, I'm pleased to be here with you, Rick.
Brilliant. Well, what I really wanted to know, Dean, because you've got a massive following here in the UK, and before the pandemic, you were coming over every year, and I know that you're coming over this year and starting off in April. I believe that your tour is going to finish in Edinburgh at the festival in August. So you're over
That's
here
right.
for quite a while, and we'll put the links at the bottom of this interview. But I really wanted to know how it all started off. Were you always interested in music? Were you always going to be a musician? Were you singing to people at 5 years old?
Well, you know what? My mom was a singer and a performer on Broadway and in film, and so there was always some Broadway show tuned on the piano or some opera playing on the turntable. So music was always going to be a big part of my life. I just grew up in a house filled with music, and I guess when I did my first coffee house gig and got a few bucks to sing songs and do something I'd love to do anyway, I thought, well, this is kind of cool. I theoretically I could make a living, making music. I'm still working on that formula. But
pretty much perfected it now, Dean, to be fair.
Well, it's always a creative challenge, but it's always been a big part of my life, and regardless of industry, twists and turns and circuitous routes, I never stopped being a musician and never stopped writing songs. And that's sort of my approach to this day.
I know it is, because as you know, I've been to see you a few times, and I'm coming to see you again in the UK when you're over, I think in April. So yeah, I'm very glad that you're still doing it. Were you always a writer, or when you first started off, were you covering other people's songs, or was it always your own songs?
Well, I think like every songwriter, I started off sort of imitating my idols, and I got my first guitar when I was about 9 years old, which I paid for with a bag full of quarters that I earned delivering newspapers in Paramus, New Jersey. and dumped them on the counter of Manny's Music on 48th Street in New York, which was Music Row there, and went home with a guitar, learned 3 or 4 chords, and started playing Beatles songs and Monkees songs, and started off sort of imitating those songs, and eventually started writing my own songs. And wrote my first song when I was 9, called "Summertime." It was when I'd love to take a swim with you in the summertime. Oh yeah, and that really started things off, and I never stopped.
Is there a recording of that somewhere that we can find, Dean?
There actually is. It's on my Dino's Demos. I can send you a link if you like.
Oh
and it's
yeah,
pretty funny.
definitely. We'll link your fans to that one. They'll love that. So you mentioned the Beatles. Were they your big idols at the time, or did you have others?
Well, it was everyone on that I could find on my transistor radio. I mean, I started out, influenced by the music my mom listened to, all the great Broadway show tunes and a lot of classical music. But since I got a transistor radio, I was exposed to all the top 40, and that included the Beatles and the Stones and the Monkees and Herman's Hermits and Dave Clark 5 and the Supremes, Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
It was just a great education. I'd be listening at night, hiding it under my pillow while I was supposed to be asleep.
I think too, we were listening to the same people, Dean, which is probably why I love your music so much, because we were influenced by the same people. But sadly, I don't write songs. But do you remember your first paid gig? The first time you said, "Okay, I'm now a professional musician."
Well, the first time I got paid was for playing a coffee house. I think I got $15, and the first unpaid gig I remember was for the Ethical Culture Society in New York. I did it with Sherry Katz. She played bass, and we sang Simon and Garfunkel songs. And what no one warned me is that their custom at the Ethical Culture Society was not to applaud in their sanctuary. So after the first song, we finished playing, and there was absolute silence. And it was a little disconcerting. He just kept going. Afterwards, they'd explained it to me.
I bet you wish they'd have done that before, though.
I do.
Very disconcerting, I would have thought. So listen,
but we forged ahead.
The first time I think we became aware of you here in the UK was probably with Ariel. So was she a real person?
Well, she was sort of an idealized composite of all these teenage girls I had a crush on growing up in the suburbs, and sort of distilled into a single, song. But I eventually met her in the park, except she spelled her name Alison, Alison.
Okay,
she shared many of those attributes.
That's fair enough. We'll leave it there then, not get you in any trouble, I think. So how did your life change after that song? And obviously it was really popular here in the UK, but were you getting the same adulation in your own country as you were getting here?
Well, it was the first single off my first album, and it went top 20 right out of the box. In fact, when it was first released, I was called in by my record company, who said that the local radio station, WNEW-FM, called to complain that all my friends were overwhelming their request lines asking for Ariel. They told me that I had to stop doing that. And I laughed because I knew that my friends weren't doing it. And eventually they recognized that it was just a natural hit and the number one requested song that summer on NEW-FM, which is the number one FM station in the country. So they finally grasped that they had a hit song on their hands, and then scrambled to try and keep up with the pressing demands, which they were not necessarily up to the task of doing. But it started things off. It was very exciting and frustrating at the same time. It was exciting because, I knew I'd done a good job and people were receptive to it. And even in those very early days, I knew that the people that I was working with that were responsible for the business end of it had real serious limitations. And that just bore out as time went on and time unfolded. And I kept having hit records, but I wasn't getting any money for it. But that's par for the course. That's part of the music.
Yeah,
business.
that's the story I hear a lot whenever I talk to musicians, is that somebody else was making the money for their creativity, and hopefully that's changed a little bit now.
Not much.
Not much. Okay,
Nope.
that's a sad story. Well, that's a conversation for another day. But we were listening to Lucky Stars and Lydia, Rocking Chair, McDonald's Girl. I mean, the hits just kept on coming, didn't they? And your life must have been very different, with all those hits at that time.
As I say, it was exciting getting exposure and being able to tour and sort of become a little potato in that big giant media stew. But there was always a sense of frustration that the people around me really didn't understand what I was doing. They didn't get it. So there were always mixed feelings. And again, I was never getting compensated, no matter how many hits I had. And eventually I knew I had to part ways with my label. And that just began a whole protracted, legal separation that continues to this day. Again, par for the course for most musicians in this business. But I did get to meet a lot of cool people, and I got a lot of really positive feedback for the music itself, and it led me onto this path of being an independent artist, and it's got the frustrations that any career or life has, but I can't complain too much because I'm grateful for all the things that it gave me.
So has it been, talking about frustrations, has it been a frustrating time that you've not been able to tour during the pandemic, or has it allowed you to be more creative during a time where you've really had to be in the studio rather than on the road?
Well, I'd have to say both. On one hand, it was devastating, sort of losing my major source of income, not being able to tour for 2 years, and having to, at the outset of it, cancel a 40-city tour that I was just all ready to embark on. So that was a challenge, economically and logistically, and just trying to manage the whole thing because I booked the tours myself. But at the same time, as you suggest, it also was an opportunity for me to spend more time in the studio working on a new album than I have ever had occasion to do. This is my 9th studio album that just came out, American Lullaby. And I really never had a chance to delve this deeply into the recording and production process as I did this time around, and due to the lockdowns and the fact that I couldn't go anywhere. I was stuck in the basement in my studio, and so it was frustrating and anxious on the one hand, but also fortuitous and gratifying on the other.
Well, we've missed you. And I know that when you do come and do gigs in the UK, and you get to that line, "Did you see Lisa?" Everybody joins in with that. Everybody I know that goes to your concerts, they wait specifically for that line so that they can engage with you. And that's a great thing about you live, Dean. Whenever I've watched you live, the whole atmosphere in there and your engagement with the audience is something that's quite something. Is that something you've always had? Because I know that you do large gigs and you do more intimate gigs, but always you seem to have that rapport with the audience.
Well, you know what? All the different facets of making music have their own kind of benefits and satisfactions. You know, writing a song is satisfying, and recording it as well, hearing the results of that. But there's nothing quite like the immediacy of the direct connection performing for a live audience. And that's something I'm always grateful for, even if I have to schlep for thousands of miles across the pond to get there with all my gear. But it's always worth it for what's always a really enthusiastic and supportive audience.
Yeah, I think everyone's really looking forward to you coming back, and I know that you're going to be up and down the country. I also know that that you like collaborating with people, and obviously Denise Marsa is the one that everybody knows that you sang with. Do you still talk to her? Do you still have a rapport with her?
Oh, well, now and then we sort of touch base and see what's going on. She continues to make music, and she's a fine songwriter of her own stuff. But I also get a real kick out of doing that song with an entire audience, because they know the words better than me.
Yeah,
and so that's always a treat.
By the way, I've been part of that audience when I've done that as well. Now, you always seem to have amusing tales about your work, so I want to talk about a couple of them. Can you talk about the fact that you got banned from the BBC, and I think this was over McDonald's Girl?
Well, as you know, that there used to be very strict rules at the BBC that prevented people from mentioning commercial trade names, because it had to always avoid anything that's hinted of commercialism. And so McDonald's Girl was officially banned by the BBC, which led to the label dropping me and derailed my career for almost 2 decades. But fortunately, not too long after that, a then unknown band out of Canada called Bare Naked Ladies did a cover version, which was their first hit in Canada. And then YouTube came along and it went viral. And people all over the world started doing their own versions of McDonald's Girl. So it was a little song that it couldn't. It insisted on being heard.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think years before Dean, a band called The Kinks, who you probably know quite well, did a song called Lola. And to get onto the BBC, they had to change Coca-Cola to Cherry Cola.
I know, sure, yeah.
Well, it's been ever since. So the BBC have always been a bit like that. So yeah, they haven't changed that much either. But the other funny story that I wanted to talk about was your musical feud with the band Half Man Half Biscuit, which I absolutely love this story. So please tell everyone this story.
Well, I was in New York and I got a call from a good friend in London, Andy. He said, "Dean, something strange is going on you need to know about." I said, "Okay, what's up?" He said, "Well, there's a band called Half Man Half Biscuit." I said, "That's a funny name for a band." He said, that's not the funny part. And he went on to explain that they had a best-selling EP, and the title track on it was "The Bastard Son of Dean Friedman." And at first I thought he was just kidding. It just didn't seem very likely. Until I landed at Heathrow Airport and he met me there with the EP in hand. And sure enough, there it was, "The Bastard Son of Dean Friedman." So I started getting a little anxious. After all, I'm Dean Friedman. But eventually I sat down and did the math, and I calculated in order for Nigel Blackwell, he's the lead singer-songwriter for Half Man Half Biscuit, for me to have fathered him, I would have to have done so when I was 7 years old. So even though I was a precocious kid, I was not that precocious. And so greatly relieved, I finally sat down and listened to the song. And it's such a great song. I mean, it's hilarious. And Nigel Blackwell is just a terrific songwriter. The Half Man Half Biscuit are a kicking band. I just thought it was hilarious. I finally met the guys, and they're good guys. And but even then, I swore that one day I would exact my revenge, and I did so when I wrote a song called "A Baker's Tale," which tells the the hitherto unknown dubious origins of one Nigel Blackwell of Half Man Half Biscuit. So I urge listeners to check out both songs.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love that song as well. So yeah, all these links are going to appear underneath this interview because I love the way that it ended up, and you ended up becoming friends. And you've really been endorsed over the years by a number of British celebrities. I was making a list of people who have endorsed your work, and they include people like Kenny Everett, Lenny Henry, Dawn French, David Baddiel, Jamie Lee Grace, and Gabby Roslin. So you've got a real wide circle of British fans here, and a lot of them have brought you onto their shows, haven't they? And you've always been really good-humoured with it all, and got involved with them. So tell us about some of your experiences with the people I've just mentioned.
Well, I appreciate this, the thoughtfulness and consideration that folks in media have extended, and sort of helping to spread the music and the words around. It's a funny world, the world of media. And so if some of those good folks you mentioned on occasion sort of reflect a little bit of their limelight in my direction, it helps to introduce my work to new audiences, and I try to do the same with my musical peers as well. That's why I do things like the Song Fest and my own webcasts, and invite folks to share their music, to introduce their music to my audience, and vice versa. So I think there's plenty of room for that kind of sharing and in terms of audiences, and otherwise it's all left up to mainstream media, and they have their own agendas, which doesn't necessarily have anything to do with music.
But you mentioned there about how you get out to audiences, and during the pandemic, you've been doing that online, and I've seen a couple of the concerts that you put out online when you haven't been able to tour. But one thing I know about you, probably more than any other musician I've ever known, is that you've been way ahead of the curve in terms of technology. So you've been involved in video games and crowdfunding, even before the Zoom concerts happened. So why has that been so? I'm really glad that it is important to you, but why is that so? Has that always been so important to you? And how do you keep ahead of that curve? Because there's a lot of other musicians that have never done that.
Well, it's all been by default, and it's partly because I've always had a curiosity about new technologies as they come about, and at the same time, there have been so many occasions, industry-wise, where I've been left to my own devices and had to figure out how to connect with that audience. That I've done things that I do. For example, the first crowdfunding album I did was in 2001, just a few months after Marillion did the same thing for the first time. And I had a bunch of new songs. I wanted to go in the studio. I didn't want to have to wait another 2 decades for permission from some label. And so I wrote an email to folks who had visited my website in those early days, saying that, if you pre-order an album, I'll go in the studio, pay musicians, and come out with a CD in a year's time. And my delivery was a little late, but eventually I got there. And I was nervous that folks would say, "Oh, Dean, why don't you get a proper job?" And some people did, but enough people supported the idea that I was able to record a new album. And I've crowdfunded my albums ever since. The first time I did that for the Treehouse Journals was almost 8 years before Kickstarter was launched.
Yeah.
And So again, it has to do with uh, appreciating and respecting your audience, and the fact that it was mutual, and they helped me pursue my work as a songwriter and recording artist. And like I say, I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, well, I think it's always worked for you, and I think your fans, whether they're here or in the States, have always appreciated that. So let's talk a little bit about your new album and the tour, because your tour starts here in April and goes through to August, and certainly we'll put links for that at the bottom of this interview. But are you doing concerts in the States or anywhere else other than the UK first? Because
I'll be doing a few warm-up dates in the States, but the bulk of the tour is in England and Scotland and Wales and Ireland. And so looking forward to it. I'm determined to grab my guitar and suitcase, get on a plane, and kick off this tour the end of April. And there's some trepidation because it's been a while, but looking forward to sharing these songs again.
Well, I will be seeing you, I believe, on May the 6th in Harpenden. So that's
Cool.
where I'll be, but there's plenty of other places where you're going to be. And I think you're spending right at the end of the tour. Is it 4 days at the Edinburgh Festival?
5 nights at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, 17th of August through the 21st. And this will be, I think, my 18th run at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
Wow.
Which is my favorite place to be in August, not just because the weather's nicer than New York, which is always hot and sweltering, but because it's a town just that is filled with artists of every ilk, performers and writers and actors and musicians.
Yeah,
all taking creative chances, and it's always an inspiration to me.
Yeah, I've been twice up to the Edinburgh Fringe, and I've always had a great time. And the Scots do know how to drink as well, so you need to stay away from some of those, I think, if you're going to see more than one concert. So tell us a little bit about American Lullaby, because this is the new album, and obviously when everybody comes to see your concerts, they love to hear all the songs that they know, but also they have it's a real pleasure to hear the new music. So tell us about American Lullaby.
Well, the whole album really was inspired about 6 years ago when I woke up along with millions of my fellow countrymen and women to discover that if a bankrupt real estate developer from New York and known money launderer for the Russian mafia had become president. And I can't overstate how mind-blowing that was and how unprepared everyone was for that reality. And so the album deals with that, but also all the subsequent crises that followed in the footsteps of that event, including, but not limited to, the pandemic and the what used to be called the looming climate crisis, but is now no longer looming or pending, is here and now. And, all the injustices that were highlighted in very stark relief as a result of the pandemic, inequality and racism and systemic racism and just the kinds of issues that are part of the everyday world, but become exacerbated when there's stress on the system. So I had all these topics that I wanted to address in song, because as a songwriter, when I'm confused about something, one of the ways I try to deal with it is to figure it out by writing a song, because it makes me think about it and try to understand. Even if I don't fully understand, at least I can try and express how I feel about it. But my dilemma was that there were a lot of difficult topics, and I didn't want to write an album that just terrified people. And so I found a framing device for the album that worked well for me, which was that of a lullaby. And if you think about a lullaby, one thing that lullabies share in common in pretty much every culture around the world is the idea that parents are trying to impart critical information to the next generation, but in gentle, soothing ways. Because you think about them, rocking the baby to sleep with a sweet, tender melody. But if you listen to the lyrics of the lullabies, they're all about all these horrible things that are going to happen to the kids.
Yeah.
Wind blows, the bough breaks, the kid falls out of the cradle falls on his head. First of all, what the hell is the kid doing up in the tree?
Yeah.
And so the format of a lullaby helped me envision how to structure the album and tell these difficult stories, but in a way that could be absorbed by a listening audience, as opposed to send them running into the hills screaming.
Well, I'm guessing,
and it was a challenge, but I think that I was able to achieve that kind of a balance.
I'm guessing there's also a bit of humor in there as well, because one of the things you're known for is adding a little bit of humor into your song. So you take people on this roller coaster ride of crying and laughing all at the same time.
Well, absolutely. Anyone that's familiar with my albums and more than just the radio hits knows that I see humor and whimsy and satire as crucial survival techniques, and that's definitely represented in at least half the songs on the new album, American Lullaby. Because even with difficult topics, sometimes the only way really to talk about them is to address the irony of some of the crazy things going on, and to poke a little bit of fun at the hypocrisy that people, in particular politicians, sort of tend to engage in, trying to justify their crazy actions. So, my albums have always had a pretty healthy mix of serious and ridiculous, and that holds true on the new album as well.
Well, it's good. Yeah, it's good to know that you're still you've still got that format, because that's what your fans love. And I was gonna wind this up by asking you what is next for you, but then I got an email from you this afternoon, and it looks like you're now going to be working with a rapper called Darko the Super. So tell us about that, because this is you moving in yet another direction.
Well, Darko the Super is a young Philly hip hop artist, recording artist, and rapper, and he stumbled upon some of my music, became a big fan, and contacted me asking if he could get permission to sample some of my work, and I was happy to do so, and the results were a real delight. He's a really talented writer and performer, and so after the first effort, he asked if he could do a whole album's worth of material, and so a couple months back, he came out with a collection called Great White Buffalo, which is his sort of reinterpretation using samples from my third album, Rumpled Romeo, and a collection of sort of stray demos called Dino's Demos. And so he sampled them, repurposed them, changed them around, and did a lot of his own orchestration and production, and lent his lyrics to those songs. And for folks that might not be familiar with the idiom, what's nice about the results of his efforts is that it has sort of the same yearning and angst and passion that the original Rumpled Romeo album has, which was filled with teenage love songs and adolescent angst. And Darker the Super has managed to sort of capture that in his own voice and interpret in his own very unique and entertaining way. It's really brilliant stuff. And it's been getting great reviews all over the States. And it also prompted us to put out a compilation album of the original tracks that inspired the Great White Buffalo album. And it's a 20-track compilation album called The Dean and I, with me and Darker the Super, a.k.a. Evan Souza. And that as well has sort of been reintroducing me to a whole new generation of hip hop and rap and pop artists here in the States and eventually all over the planet. And so it's nice, to have the work recognized and to have it enjoyed and introduced to a whole new generation.
Well, for me, it also shows how you're still ahead of the curve, that you keep on staying ahead of the curve. And I'm sure you're going to be doing that for the next 10, 20, maybe 30 years, Dean.
Let's see how long I can pull it off.
I can't see you ever giving up, to be honest. You always stay young. You're older than me, but you look younger than me, and so yeah, I'm jealous. But that talent is always there, and your fans always wait for your new albums because they know that you never drop your standards at all. And hopefully you and I are going to be doing a book next year. So I'm looking forward to that and looking forward to working with you. I'm also looking forward to seeing you again, because it's about 3 years, I think, since I've actually seen you in the flesh. This is the first time I've actually talked to you for 2 years face to face. So that's good as well. And what I want to know before you leave is, have the Knicks got any better? Because I wore this for you. I wore this for you. And the only time I came to see them at Madison Square Gardens, they lost pretty heavily. So if I'm going to come back to New York to see you, Dean, then I need to know that the Knicks are a bit better than they used to be.
Well, they can't have gotten much worse than they were when you were here last. I'll say that.
All right, look, this has been brilliant. Thank you very much for your time. It's been great talking to you. I'm sure your fans are going to love this interview and hearing a little bit more about you, and then coming to your concerts and engaging with you at those, and also buying your albums. And as I keep on saying, we're going to put those links at the bottom of the screen. So Dean Friedman, thank you very much, and I will see you personally in May, and we look forward to having you there.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me. Good seeing you. Take care, and I'll see you there.
Brilliant. Take care. Bye, Dean. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that, everyone. I certainly did, and it was great to speak to Dean from way on the other side of the Hudson, over there in New York, and he looks in fine form, and I'm really looking forward to going to his concert in May. He's over from, as he said, from April right the way through to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in August. So please come and see him. The links are at the bottom of this interview, and I promise you his concerts are well worth going to. We're going to be doing a lot more in the Fox's Den interviews this year, as we did last year, and so please subscribe to the channel so that you know what's going on, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
What are you crazy? How in the hell can you
talking to myself, shut the door and come to bed.
By the way, I forgot to say, your endearing mother called today.
Did you see Lisa?
Yes, I saw Lisa.
Is that why you're angry?
I wasn't angry.